Friends, can Reiki cure ADHD? No, no, Reiki cannot cure ADHD. I'm going to just go ahead and take the suspense out right at the top. However, what I can tell you as a 10-year practitioner and teacher of the system of Reiki, and as one who has lived with a very ADHD oriented brain my whole life, the answer to this question is actually much more delightful, empowering, and effective than if it had simply been yes. Friends, let's talk about it. Welcome to Heartscapes, where we are learning the system of Reiki to live lives that are rooted, spacious, connected, and that provision us for the journeys back home to ourselves. My name is Michaela. Thanks for joining me in the studio again today on this All Hallows Eve, the day before Halloween and Samhain, and the time of great transition in our world and in our culture and in our hearts. It's a good time to be practicing the system of Reiki. I sometimes get asked or get into conversations with folks about this question of the interface between experiencing the system of Reiki, either as a practitioner oneself or receiving treatments, and various forms of neurodivergence. And oftentimes in these conversations, there's this almost heartbreaking subtext of the question that we began with: can Reiki cure neurodivergence? And it's heartbreaking because neurodivergence is not something to be cured. It's not something that needs to be cured, in my opinion, as a neurodivergent person. It's part of the normal spectrum of the way in which a human can have a brain, can have a mind. It is part of the diversity of our species. And unfortunately, like many other forms of diversity, it is one that has not been well understood, respected, or embraced by society, by families, and of course by ourselves. That is changing. It has changed quite a lot since my childhood, when I knew vaguely that I had this diagnosis. I knew that there were things different about me, but I didn't really know what that meant. And as I grew up, there were things about myself that were challenging, that were a struggle, but I never really knew, is that ADHD? Is that just me being weird? Is this just a normal thing that everybody experiences? There wasn't an easy way for me to delineate those things. I very much appreciate how much this conversation has become much more public, how much more information we have about neurodivergence, and all of the folks on social media who are sharing their lived experience, also their research, their experience from clinical perspectives, to help me and others just understand the makeup of my brain, both the challenges that being ADHD and other forms of neurodivergent bring into our lives, but also the superpowers that often, maybe even always, lie on the other side of those challenges. And it's there that the system of Reiki really steps in to bring a powerful ally into our experience of our own neurodiversity. I want to talk about that a bit today from my personal experience and from experiences that I have heard in conversation with others. The system of Reiki is simple and yet also complex in the way in which it can interface with our system. Of course, our system is also very complex. And so the interface between practicing Reiki and our experience of neurodiversity is going to be more complex, more subtle, and reveal itself in more ways than we can talk about in this video. So instead, I want to focus on two specific aspects of my experience with ADHD that have been dramatically supported by practicing the system of Reiki as a self practice. And as you may know, if you've been with me for a bit on this channel, we do focus on the system of Reiki as a self practice. So often we're talking about the way in which the 5 elements of the system of Reiki and the many practices that are inside of that system from its Japanese perspective, the Japanese form being different than the Western form, is a very powerful and effective and elegant self-practice. And of course, there's also much to be said about the experience of having Reiki treatments shared from somebody else. So sharing Reiki sessions with other people or being a recipient of Reiki from someone else. And so I do want to touch on that as well, in addition to focusing on Reiki as a self-practice. So when I really reflected, the last time somebody asked me this question, which was recently, in what ways has your Reiki practice supported you with your ADHD? Because I had made that comment. I really had to reflect on that for a while, right? And to kind of get into the specifics. And there were two particular ways in which my mind came into focus around this question that I want to share. One is around enhancing the superpowers of ADHD, the things that make our mind specially equipped to do certain things very, very well, and in ways that other brains have maybe more of a challenge doing. So, supporting those superpowers, and then also supporting how do I want to say it? Kind of a grounding down, a settling down of some of the particular challenges that come along with those superpowers. Oftentimes, it's the challenges that we are most focused on because, of course, they're interfering with our life. They're causing difficulty. Maybe other people are criticizing them or seeing them as a problem to be fixed or as a disease to be cured. So, I want to really emphasize the amazing things that can happen when we are neurodiverse, and also the ways in which we really do need support on the things that are difficult. So that's the first piece. And the second piece is around our own mindset and our own relationship to our neurodiversity, to our experience with those challenges and with other people's perception of those challenges. All right, so let's begin with the special spicy blend of challenges and superpowers that I have experienced with ADHD. Everybody's experience will be a little bit different, but there are, of course, certain patterns that differentiate one way of being from another. One that is particularly common for my experience and for many others is the way in which my mind wants to gather up all of the information and think about and focus on many, many, many things at the same time. So, this kind of scatterbrained experience, which can often lead to overwhelm. For women in particular, ADHD tends to be mental hyperactivity more so than physical hyperactivity, which is one of the reasons that it's less common for women to be diagnosed with ADHD because it doesn't express itself in the stereotypical way. Again, our understanding of that is changing, and it's becoming easier to recognize the way in which ADHD shows up differently in different people. For me, it is absolutely mental hyperactivity. And that can be incredibly overwhelming. And it can cause paralysis, it can cause decision fatigue. There are so many thoughts that I can be having at one time, so many actions that I want to take, and they're stumbling over each other. They're fighting for priority in my mind. My attention is being snatched this way and that by all of the different thoughts and ideas and projects that I really would love to have. I am great at ideating, creating ideas, creating visions, imagining possibility. I struggle to enact those ideas in the real world, largely because of the overwhelm and the subsequent paralysis, like decision paralysis and action paralysis that comes from that sense of overwhelm. And so often I might seem very kind of physically stoic and still while my mind is racing and trying to decide which direction to go in first. There's a prioritization difficulty that is pretty persistent in my experience and that of many others. And so, how has the system of Reiki really supported tempering that challenge and bringing forward the kind of superpower side of that? Well, we have to come back to the basics. The foundational practice of the system of Reiki in its original form from Japan, Joshin Kokyuho, or a method to focus or purify the mind. This is a practice that I've shared on this channel many, many times. It is the foundational practice for everything else that we do in the system of Reiki. And so I am sharing that practice with others, and I am in that practice for myself every day. It is really, if there was one practice to take from the system of Reiki, probably I would say it's Joshin Kokyuho. So if we even just look at that name, Joshin Kokyuho, a method to focus or purify the mind. Well, what does an ADHD mind need? Possibly the most. It needs the ability to focus. It needs a tether. It needs a lifeline, a root down to the ground so that we can feel solid, feet on the ground, ready to focus and take the next step to move out of that sense of paralysis. That kind of mind spinning in different directions, having a difficult time setting a priority, is a form of anxiety, although I don't always feel it as anxiety. I don't experience it in my body the same way that I necessarily experience anxiety. But the similarity is that both are an untethered mind, a mind that is not grounded enough to decide what to do next, right? To focus, to feel that we can move forward. So it is an untethered mind, a mind that is kind of blowing about in the wind, difficult to control, difficult to kind of rein in and put to work in service of what it is that we want or need to do. And Joshin Kokyuho is a specific remedy for that condition. It is many other things. It brings many, many benefits. And as the foundation for the system of Reiki, it opens up all of the other pathways that the system provides for us. At its fundamental level, Joshin Kokyuho is a method to focus the mind and to put the mind and the physical body back into relationship and collaboration and integration with each other. It's a fundamentally integrative practice that allows us to use sensation, specifically the sensation of our breath, the posture of our body, and the focus of our mind to come together in a way that allows us to be more effective throughout our whole system. Different people will struggle with different parts of that. For me, and others perhaps like me, the difficult part is calling the mind back from all of the 75 places that it's wanting to spend its time in any given moment, calling the breath back and allowing it to focus on something specific. Hopefully, the next right thing to do, the next priority. And so we use the breath, the sensation of the breath, the posture of the body to be that anchoring point of focus. And sometimes movement, sometimes touch. There are other ways to increase that capacity to focus, to help our mind, to support our mind to do something it is struggling to do, and to allow the incredible capacity of our mind to notice and track and perceive and hold so much information, allow that ability to be more in its fullness, more in its wholeness. My teacher often uses a phrase that I've adopted and often share as well, which is that in the system of Reiki, healing is remembering the wholeness of our true self. And when it comes to my experience with ADHD in the system of Reiki, this is absolutely true, that practicing Joshin Kokyuho allows me to experience myself in a more whole and holistic way so that the capacities of my body and my energy and my mind can be maximized and can be in their fullness and their brilliance rather than in their deficit and their difficulty. So the simple practice, which I've led in many other videos, so we're not going to do a practice video today, but I will put a link down below to a video that gives you a pretty detailed walkthrough of this practice so that you can practice it along with me. This practice of Joshin Kokyuho over time has had a profound impact on my ability to root down, to feel centered, to select a priority from the many, many things that is going on in my mind in any given moment, and to take the next step. And I can't tell you how life-changing that has been. It's been profound to be able to cultivate that capacity. This is still a struggle, but it is much less of a struggle. And by anchoring myself down and relaxing the parts that are difficult, I've been able to really notice and appreciate the parts that are really quite amazing about having the brain that I do. For example, the quality of hyperfixation, that is the other side of the equation. So there's the like diffused mind going in 75 places at the same time, interspersed with periods of hyperfixation, where all of a sudden our mind grabs onto something and is able to really focus on that thing and maybe only focus on that thing for a period of time. I used to call this my lion energy. I guess I still do. This idea of having these bursts of speed, these bursts of energy, like a lion going after its prey, and this burst of speed and energy, and then followed by long periods of rest, long periods of seeming inactivity. Now, of course, I know there's plenty of activity still going on in here, but physical inactivity because of needing to recover from that burst of energy and also kind of going back into that sense of paralysis. And so working with Joshin Kokyoho over time has allowed that cycle to, first of all, be less stark, less distance and time between the periods of hyperfixation. The hyperfixation being more relaxed, more under my own control. I've increased my ability to choose what I'm fixating on as opposed to it just kind of coming out of my impulses, however that looks on a given day. And then to also shorten the time that I need to be in that kind of, paralysis kind of space. It's also allowed me to see that time of rest, that time that I, often call paralysis, as actually a time of integration and ideation, a time when my mind can step into its incredible capacity to work with so many different thoughts and ideas at the same time. And the problem is not necessarily that my mind does that. It's that experience can be very frustrating and something that I resist. And that actually brings me to the second part, the kind of second distinct way in which practicing the system of Reiki has really improved my life around being neurodivergent. And that is around understanding and acceptance of who and what I am. When we are different in any way from society, but especially in ways that make it difficult for us to kind of follow the rules and the norms, be that kid in school who's labeled as disruptive or distracted or a daydreamer, or all these things that we call kids who aren't able to just sit down and focus and do the things that they're supposed to do. When we grow up that way, it is almost inevitable that we are going to develop that story about ourselves, that we're going to see ourselves as disruptive, distracted, unnecessarily dreamy. We're going to become frustrated with those parts of ourselves, and it'll become very difficult to really notice and understand what's happening when we are in those mental states. And this is where the precepts of the system of Reiki have been so powerful, combined with Joshin Kokyoho, as we always do, getting into that grounded space that Joshin Kokyoho brings us into by focusing our attention in our first diamond, the energy center in our low belly that is associated with the body, associated with the earth, brings us a sense of grounding and focus. So we come into that place. And then working with the precepts of the system of Reiki that allow us a place to focus our attention and to contemplate how we are in relationship to ourselves, to others, to the world, and to do that without judgment, but with curiosity and with noticing. And then to contemplate what it might mean to come into good, right relationship with ourselves and others around whatever it is that we're thinking about and focusing on in that meditation. The foundation of the precepts is just for today. I am compassionate with myself and with others. This is an incredibly powerful place to start when we have been given or has been forced upon us a story about ourselves that we are bad or wrong in some way. Some fundamental aspect of how and who we are is disruptive and difficult and should be cured or otherwise made different, right? When we have that story, finding compassion for ourselves can be, number one, incredibly difficult, and number two, incredible medicine. Because to really be able to be with the pain of that experience, compassion, to be with pain, to be with suffering, to be with passionate experiences of life, to be able to be with ourselves in that difficulty without judgment, with curiosity, with simply with acceptance, is it transforms not only the way that we think about ourselves, that story that we tell, but how we actually experience ourselves in the world. And so when we come into that grounded place that Joshin Kokyoho brings us to, and then we open up the question of what does it mean to be good, right relationship with compassion to myself, it has an incredibly relaxing effect on our system. And so in doing that, working with the contemplation exercises that are part of the system of Reiki and the mantra practices, using the precepts themselves as a mantra, again, slowly over time, my relationship to these challenging aspects of ADHD changed. The precept above compassion is just for today, I am true to my way and my being. Just for today, I am true to my way and my being. Well, part of my way in this lifetime, in this body, is that I have ADHD. My mind behaves in the way that it does with all kinds of wacky stuff that goes on. So in order to be true to myself, it's not about suppressing those things or changing those things or getting rid of those things. It's about accepting those things, befriending them, coming into relationship with them, supporting myself to relax the things that are so challenging and frustrating about those ways of being, and support the ways of uniqueness and beauty that are part of that way of being so that I can be true to myself. The precept above that is just for today, I am grateful. And once I was able to come into compassion for the way in which my mind operates, and compassion for others for the way that I'm treated when my mind is misbehaving, according to the story, and I have come into being true to myself, right? In more and more ways over time, honoring who and what I am without trying to fundamentally change who and what I am, then I can come into a place of actually feeling and delighting in gratitude for who and what I am. And this is where I really was able to start working with the gifts and the superpowers of ADHD. I was able to say, okay, this way of being that I have has challenges, but it also has incredible gifts. And I got curious about exploring that. So one example that I got a chance to talk about with my teaching apprentices this past week is that characteristic of having a bunch of different thoughts vying for attention at any given moment, all over, floating around in the air around me. When I'm untethered, when I'm ungrounded, right? Again, that brings a sense of paralysis, a sense of overwhelm. But when I am grounded and I am in connection with my body and I do feel my feet on the ground, now the superpower of that opens up. I can be teaching a class, for example, and this is what the question was from my teaching apprentice. She asked, she observed that I will often, throughout a 3-hour class, be pulling comments and insights and information and details that people said maybe an hour or two ago in the conversation. And in the middle of teaching, pulling back that comment that somebody made an hour or so ago and weaving it into whatever it is that I'm saying in that moment, pulling these examples, weaving them together, allowing them to enhance what it is that I'm teaching with information that I myself didn't plan. It's coming from the other participants in the room. Often quite a few of those details coming out at different points and weaving together, creating a seamless teaching around whatever it is we're talking about that day. And she said, how do you do that? How do you track all of those different things and remember to mention it, 2 hours later and bring it into context in a way that makes sense for whatever it is that you're teaching? And the answer is ADHD. At least for me, that's my answer. That again, from that grounded place, from that tethered mind, the fact that I'm catching details from all around me all the time, that my mind is noticing things happening in all directions when I'm not overwhelmed by it and I'm not paralyzed by it. It's almost as if I can literally pluck those things out of the air and pin them in front of me over here on the side, and just pluck this one and pin it over here, and pluck this one and pin it up there. And then they're available to me. Those thoughts are available to me to pull in as they're needed as I am teaching. I don't need to write them down. I don't need to capture them in any other way. They're available to me. And that, from my perspective and my experience investigating my brain and my experience, is absolutely a function of my ADHD. That's not to say that there isn't other types of brains that might have a very keen memory and be able to track information like that. This is not exclusive to ADHD, but the particular way in which it shows up for me, where it's literally as if there are like thoughts floating by that I can see or perceive, and I can grab them and stick them right there in front of me. That does feel specific to my experience of ADHD. So being in compassion for who and what I am, choosing to be true to who and what I am, and being grateful for who and what I am is an incredibly powerful alchemy of magic that has fundamentally changed my relationship with myself. And it's allowed me to really bring forward those gifts, the one I just described just being one of many, and really emphasize them and support them and nourish them and praise them and appreciate them and talk about them with other people and ascribe them to my neurodivergence so that other people can have more of an appreciation and gratitude for differently minded folks. And that has allowed me to release my fears about being different, my fears that the scattered nature of my mind will hinder me, which it has in a variety of ways. I mean, trying to run a small business all by myself with the brain that I have that can sometimes refuse to focus and take the next step and do the next thing that I need to do to run my business can be incredibly challenging. And I have fear about that, about the impact of that on my life. And that fear can have associated anger with it. You know, why do I have to be like this? Like, why can't I just act normal or whatever that means? So that gets us to the top of the precepts. Just for today, I anger not and I worry not. And this does not mean never being afraid and never having anger or suppressing those feelings, or to say that those feelings are bad in any way. That's not at all what Ikaruna Shinpai Suna, the first two precepts, just for today I worry not, just for today I anger not. Actually, reverse those. Anger not, worry not. That precept is not calling those emotions bad or saying that we should not have them. If we look more at the translation of those words in Japanese, it's more that it's saying that we need to make space inside of ourselves, create a void, an openness within us where our feelings, our intense feelings like fear and anger, have space to come through, show us what they're there to show us, give us the information they're there to give us, help to focus our mind on what is provoking those feelings, and then move through so that we don't hold on to them. We don't live our lives in worry or anxiety or fear about the negative impacts of having the brain that we have, for example. We don't hold on to anger about the way we've been treated or the way that we struggle. That those emotions are simply there to help us focus our attention, to help us notice what's important to us, and then they can move right on along. So that's the precepts. And working with them consistently over time, using targeted contemplation practices that allow us to apply the precepts very specifically to experiences that we're having, has fundamentally changed my relationship to myself, including my ADHD. So those for me are really the two primary pillars, significant ways in which practicing the system of Reiki consistently over time has not cured me of ADHD, but brought me into good, right relationship with that aspect of myself, allowed me to see that it is not something that needs to be cured. It is part of the normal spectrum of human experience that brings its own challenges and gifts, like any other way of being a human. And that, in the system of Reiki, is healing. Remembering the wholeness of our true self, even if the whole of our self feels difficult. And practicing over time, of course, is the sweet spot. But any moment that we can have that feeling of groundedness and rootedness and focus that Joshin Kokyu-ho brings to us, or any moment that we can feel genuine compassion or gratitude for how we are, a moment of being true to ourselves, has an impact on us, right? So we can have these targeted moments of being in a practice and having it treat a difficult experience that we're having. And then if we stay with these practices over time, they will fundamentally change our experience of ourselves and our own lives and our relationships to other people in our lives. So I just wanted to bring that into focus using the specific experience of being neurodiverse, for me, particularly ADHD, and to just kind of help us continue to see the way in which this system is so simple, it's so elegant, and yet so deep in how it can impact our lives. I promised you I would also mention the impact of receiving Reiki treatments in terms of ADHD. And so, again, my practice focuses on Reiki as a self-practice, but of course I do have a practice sharing Reiki with other people using Tenohira, the hands-on healing element of the system of Reiki, one of 5 elements. And I absolutely love receiving Reiki treatments from colleagues as well. And there are similar impacts of having Reiki treatments shared with us to what I just described. But one additional thing that I have personally appreciated so much about receiving Reiki treatments, and this may be true for others, I don't know, I haven't asked specifically, but this is absolutely true for me when I'm receiving Reiki, is that when I'm in that place of where all I need to do is rest and notice what's happening in my body and respond in ways that are supportive, which usually means just kind of zoning out. It gives my system permission to be myself. I allow my mind to do whatever my mind wants to do in that session, which often involves going in 75 different places at once. So it becomes this space where my body is well supported, my body is relaxed and open, and that gives permission to my mind to open, to be spacious. I don't put any restrictions on what I should be thinking about. I just allow my mind to do its ADHD thing and just hippity hop from one thought to the next, from one topic to the next, following breadcrumbs into the woods and into the ocean, and doing what it's going to do while my body is being so well supported and tended and grounded by the Reiki treatment. And that has been really a beautiful way to come to be true to my way and my being, to be in compassion for myself, and to just let my mind rest into itself, to be itself, to just fly wide open without the pressure of expectation that I'm supposed to be focusing on anything in particular, right? Because it's amazing to learn to focus my mind in the ways that I just described. It's also amazing to allow my mind to just be unfocused, untethered, floating about for a period of time without any expectation, without any constraint, without any next right thing that I need to do. Because then I don't feel that sense of paralysis. I don't feel that sense of overwhelm. I just can let my mind be as wide open as it likes to be, which can be pretty freaking wide. And anytime that we are in a situation where we are receiving compassionate, kind, consensual care from another person, it's a way of showing ourselves compassion and kindness and being true to ourselves by being open to receiving that kind of care. There are probably other ways in which receiving Reiki sessions have interfaced with my ADHD. I am curious what your experiences might have been in either meditative self practices like Reiki, or in receiving sessions or receiving guided practice from others around your experiences of neurodiversity. Or if a system like Reiki, something like the precepts, has helped you to come into more acceptance of other people in your life who may be differently minded than you, have different sorts of brains than you in ways that might make it challenging. Have practices like this helped you to open up more acceptance and understanding for yourself or others? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what has worked for you, what has excited you in this conversation, and what your experiences have been. So thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with me today, letting me kind of float through this topic in a way that hopefully felt grounded and focused enough for our purposes here. And as you go into the rest of your day, may you have all the provisions that you need to take the next step, to focus your mind in the ways that are serving you well, and to do the next right thing in your priorities. May you be deeply provisioned for it. Till next time, thank you so much. I love you. Goodbye.